Hey gang, what's up? Welcome back here to another edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys making some time to check today's video out. Guys, today we're going to be talking about the second biggest a-hole I've ever met in fishing over the past 50 years. Did a video a couple weeks ago of the biggest a-hole, so this is number 2. Although there's a bunch of them out there. I'm going to do several videos on this, and they all could be, considered number 1 based upon what your criteria is. But anyway, I'm gonna share the story with you today on what the second biggest one in my opinion was. Guys, real quick before we get started, just one quick housekeeping tip. I want to invite everybody out there to check out our Fish the Moment virtual lessons we do. This is something you can book a Zoom call with me, like an hour-long Zoom call. We can go over anything you want to, talk about fishing, talk about techniques, lakes, whatever. If you're struggling with something, it's a good resource to maybe help you out with that. And I'll put the Fish the Moment virtual lesson link in the description here. So much appreciated. Okay, guys, I'll talk about number 2 here. There's a bunch of them out there. When you fish for 50 years like I have, you're going to have some stories about this. But number 2 was this dude I ran into down at Grand Lake. Now, my mom and dad used to have a little trailer down there by Sailboat Bridge at Grand Lake. So for 30 years, so every weekend for almost 30 years, from the time I was a sophomore in high school until I was up in the 2000s, I was down there at Grand Lake, fishing. I knew it like the back of my hand. And maybe a quarter mile away from the cove we were at in Grand Lake there was this row of boat docks that I always liked to fish. And there was probably 5 or 6 docks on there. And anyway, the first time that I started fishing down this row of docks, I'd caught some fish down 2 or 3 docks, and there was one dock that was pretty good. There was a lot of brush around it, and I'd always catch fish on it. So I fished around this dock for a couple months, and all of a sudden on one of the trips down there, and at this time I was probably, I don't know, maybe 20 years old, something like that. I'm fishing around this dock that had the good brush on it, and I was with a buddy of mine, and this guy comes out of his house, and he comes running down the bank down to his dock down there, and he's probably, he looked old. Back then I was 20 years old, so he looked like an old dude, but he was probably in his 50s, more than anything. He comes running down there shouting. He goes, you little bastards, get away from my dock. He goes, there's no fishing around this dock here. And I didn't know what to say, because I didn't know any rules like that. So, we went around it, and we're saying, God, what a jerk, like that. So anyway, after I told my, dad about that, and some different people, and they go, nobody can keep you from fishing around the dock. He said, you can't touch their dock, you can't get out on their dock, but they can't keep you from fishing around the dock. So we kept, about every weekend, we'd start fishing the same row of docks, and every time this dude would come down screaming at us, calling us, cussing at us, calling at us. He'd walk out on the dock and he'd start just yelling at us, and we'd fish around it and keep going like that. So anyway, the next time I got down there, what he had did is he'd put out these rod holders all around his dock. And guys, he literally had probably 30 fishing rods. He had these rod holders spaced like 12 inches apart, and he'd have these rods with lines out on them. So he'd like cast lines out away from his dock all the way around his dock. So literally, it was physically impossible to fish around this dock because he had lines out, and then the lines were so far out in the water that you had to like swing way out, or you were going to get in his lines. And when you got close to his dock, like I'd work down that same row of docks, and he'd come running out. He goes, you guys better not get in that line. He goes, I don't want to see you guys touching those lines up here. He goes, you little bastards, get out of here. Over and over again. So finally we figured out, I was at this point, I was just sort of like, you sort of just had enough. This guy was just being a major a-hole. So we figured out that if we got in close to the bank, we could at least fish under the walkway part of it over there. So we started doing that, and of course he'd come down and start cussing at us, and did that a couple times. And then about a month later, we come back there, and we were working down the same, our regular milk run, where there's 5 or 6 docks. We just fish them all the time. We got down to this dude's dock, we knew something was going to come up every time. So we get about probably 50 foot away from it, And all of a sudden, the water starts boiling up all around his dock. And we get up there, and what the guy had done, he'd installed these big fans underneath the outside of his dock. And they do this like up north to keep the water from freezing around docks and stuff like that. And as soon that he didn't do anything until he saw us coming, and as soon as he saw us coming, he'd turn on these fans and the water would start boiling underneath his dock and just making this big ruckus out there, you know, trying to keep us away. So eventually at that point, after about a year of this, I didn't fish the lake quite as much in that area over there, and it just sort of faded out. And eventually, after a couple of years, I don't know if he passed away or moved, because it wasn't like that after that. So he had went to the extent of cussing us out every time, throwing out poles everywhere, you know, just belittling us and putting these fans on to keep people fishing away from his dock. And it wasn't just us. I'm sure there was other guys out there too. But anyway, guys, that's a-hole number 2 out there. And like I said, well, I got a bunch of them. We'll keep telling you guys some stories occasionally. So hope you guys are doing good. We'll talk later.